Okay, so for this deep dive, we're looking at the Katie Memory Jones case. You know, the one from the deck,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, I remember that one.
Yeah. Um, you know, I gotta say, listening to that, I mean, thinking about being out with friends, like on a warm night, you're just walking home, a route you've taken a million times, you know,
Right, right.
and then just gone. I mean, vanished.
It's chilling, yeah. And
Yeah.
for those of us who, grew up in a time when walking home alone didn't feel quite so, well, dangerous, it's
Yeah,
a real wake-up call, isn't it?
it is. It makes you think about like how quickly things can change. Like one minute you're laughing with friends and the next.
Unsettling, yeah.
And the deck really did a good job, I think, of setting that scene.
Yeah.
You picture being there at the Midwood Country Club with her and her friends.
Yeah, the episode really captured that feeling of normalcy, right? The ordinariness of the evening.
Exactly.
And then, bam, this horrific event just completely shatters that sense of safety. It's really, well, disturbing.
Yeah. And then you hear those 911 calls, and at first people think it's fireworks, right?
Right.
And then later it's like, wait a minute, were those gunshots?
Exactly. And then there's that neighbor drawn outside by, I think it was a car alarm, or was it?
I think it was the realty office alarm, wasn't it?
Yeah, that's right, the realty office. He hears that alarm going off and goes to check it out and stumbles upon her body.
It's just awful. And to think it happened in such a familiar place, you know.
It adds to the horror, doesn't it? This wasn't some dark alley. This was her neighborhood.
Right. Exactly. And the podcast talks about all those dead ends the police ran into early on.
Oh, yeah, no real physical
For
evidence.
her purse, they found it with cash still inside.
Right. So at first they're thinking maybe a personal grudge or a robbery, but that doesn't seem to fit either.
It's like they kept hitting these walls, you
No.
know. Every lead just fizzled out.
And then, of course, there's the surveillance footage.
Ah, yes, the mysterious car.
Right, that tan or silver sedan, but the footage is grainy.
And the time codes are messed up.
Yeah. It's just another layer of frustration, isn't it?
It is. You'd think with all the technology these days, solving cases would be easier. But it's not always that simple, is it?
Not at all. There are always limitations, like those time code issues. It's almost like taking a step forward and then two steps back.
And speaking of technology, I was really intrigued by how they used cell phone data in this case.
Oh, yeah, yeah. It's like something out of a TV show, isn't it? Trying to track everyone who was in the area at that time.
Right, exactly. But then there's that whole issue of privacy, isn't there?
Of course, of course. It's a tough balance. You want to solve the crime, but you don't want to just go snooping through everyone's private lives, do you?
No, you're right. And they did get access to the data, but, well, it didn't really lead anywhere.
Another dead end. It's almost like with each one, you feel that hope fading a little bit more, you know?
It's got to be so disheartening for everyone involved.
Hmm.
But what really struck me was how dedicated the investigators were, even years later.
Yeah, Detective Hefner, he never gave up, did he?
He didn't. And the podcast does a great job of reminding us that Katie wasn't just a victim, you know. She was a real person with a whole life.
That's so important. And the way her mother described her in the Charlotte Observer article, just full of life, ready to take on the world.
Yeah, it's heartbreaking. And to think it was all taken away so suddenly, so violently.
It's a tragedy, no doubt about it. And the outpouring of support from the community, from her friends and family, it speaks volumes about the kind of impact she had on people.
It's clear she was loved, that's for sure. And that community support seems like it was a real driving force in keeping the case alive, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. They didn't let her be forgotten. And eventually that led to the case being reopened in 2019 by the cold case unit, right?
Right. And that's when they decided to take that, well, that pretty big step of getting cell phone records for everyone in that one block radius.
Yeah, that was a bold move, trying to track everyone who was near the murder scene during that half-hour window.
It definitely raises some ethical questions, doesn't it?
It does. I mean, imagine having access to the location data of potentially hundreds of people, most of whom are completely innocent.
It's a lot of power, that's for sure.
Yeah.
And as the detective mentioned in the episode, judges don't hand out those kinds of warrants lightly.
No, they don't. But in this case, they did. But even with all that data, they still couldn't find anything conclusive.
No, it was another dead end. Like, nobody was using their phone in that area at that time, or at least not in a way that left any kind of trace.
It's almost as if the digital world just went silent during those crucial minutes. Strange, isn't it?
It is. You'd think with all the technology we have today, there'd be some kind of trail, but there wasn't. But like you said before, the investigators didn't give up. They went back, looked at the surveillance footage again, frame by frame this time.
Painstaking work, I bet.
It must have been. And that's when they noticed something odd about the suspect's car.
What was that?
It seemed to be driving in circles before Katie was killed.
Interesting.
Right. I mean, at first it might not seem like much. But then you start thinking.
Was he looking for someone? Was she targeted?
It really shifts the whole narrative, doesn't it? It makes it seem more, I don't know, premeditated.
Right. Less random, more calculated. Which honestly makes it even creepier.
Definitely. And the detective in the episode mentions how robbery murders are pretty rare in Charlotte.
Yeah, I remember that.
So this new theory, while unsettling, at least gave them something new to focus on, right?
Yeah. A new thread to pull on.
Exactly. So they requested another warrant, this one for a larger area but a shorter time frame. Just those crucial minutes surrounding Katie's disappearance.
Looking for what exactly?
A device on the move. One that matched the movements of that suspicious car. They were hoping to find a digital breadcrumb trail.
Makes sense. Did they?
Well, at first, it seemed like they had a few promising leads. But then, as they dug deeper...
They fell apart.
Yep. Another round of dead ends. Another wave of disappointment.
It's a tough case, that's for sure.
It really is.
Yeah.
But it's incredible how dedicated those investigators were, even after all these years.
It is, yeah. They didn't let the case fade away.
That's for sure.
It's got to be tough, All those dead ends.
Yeah, it's like getting your hopes up, only to have them dashed again and again.
Right, exactly. And for Katie's family, I mean, can you imagine?
I can't. It would be unbearable.
To be clinging to hope, but knowing that the answers, they might never come.
Yeah. It's tough. But, one thing that really stood out to me from the episode was how the community came together. Remember all those people who wanted to help?
Yeah. Yeah, the outpouring of support was amazing. Everyone from friends and family to people she worked with.
Right. And if you read through, the comments on her Facebook page and stuff.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, you really get a sense of who she was,
What was she like? I mean, what did they say?
Well, she seemed like just a really vibrant person, loved animals, super close to her friends.
It makes it all the more tragic, doesn't it?
It does. Knowing that someone so full of life just gone. And it makes me think about, the importance of community, especially when something terrible happens.
Yeah, it's like everyone kind of pulled together, united by this shared grief, and also that determination to find out what happened.
Exactly. And even though the case went cold for a while, you could tell Detective Hefner, he never really let it go.
Right. He seemed determined to keep her memory alive, to not let her become just another statistic.
Yeah. And in 2019, it got handed over to the cold case unit. Which honestly seemed like a good thing, right?
Yeah, fresh set of eyes, maybe. A chance to look at everything with a new perspective.
Right, and that's when they went for those cell phone records, remember?
Oh, right, for that whole area around the murder scene.
Yeah, it was a long shot, really.
It was, yeah. I mean, like we talked about before, there are a lot of ethical considerations there, right?
Right. Is it right to access the data of so many people, most of whom probably had nothing to do with it?
Yeah, it's tricky. But the judge obviously felt like, in this case, it was justified.
Yeah, but even with all that data, nothing.
Another dead end. So frustrating.
Right, incredibly. It almost seems like during those key minutes, the digital world just went dark.
Weird, isn't it? You'd think there'd be some kind of trace. But the investigators, they didn't give up, did they?
They didn't. They went back to that surveillance footage again, looking at it super carefully.
I can't imagine having to go through all that again.
Me neither. But it paid off, in a way. They noticed something.
What was that?
The car, the suspect's car. It was driving in circles before it happened.
Before Katie was killed?
Yeah.
So maybe he was looking for a victim. Circling. Waiting for the right moment.
It's possible, right?
Yeah.
And it makes the whole thing even creepier, doesn't it?
Oh, yeah. Less random. More like he knew what he was doing.
And the detective mentioned that robbery murders are pretty rare in Charlotte.
Oh, right.
So maybe this wasn't a random act of violence after all.
Yeah, maybe she was targeted specifically. For her purse, maybe.
It's possible. So they got another warrant, this time focusing on a smaller time frame, but a larger area.
Okay, so what were they looking for this time?
They were trying to find, a device that was on the move. One that matched the movements of that car.
Ah, okay, so they're thinking maybe they could trace the killer through his phone or something?
That's the idea. It was risky, but they had to try something.
So did they find anything?
Well, they thought they had a couple of leads. Devices that were active in the area at that time.
Sounds promising.
It did, at first. But then, one by one, those leads just fell apart.
Ugh, another dead end. It's gotta be demoralizing.
Totally. But you got to admire their persistence, right?
Yeah, you do. It would be so easy to just give up after all that, but they didn't.
It's inspiring, isn't it? That they kept going. I mean,
It really is. Like, it kind of makes you think about hope, like even when things seem impossible. Exactly. And you can hear it in the episode too, that hope, not just from the investigators, but from Katie's family and friends.
yeah. They never gave up on finding answers. And while the episode doesn't really, solve anything, it does leave you feeling like, well, like the case isn't over.
Right. It's not closed. Like Detective Hefner said, somebody knows something.
Yeah, someone out there has the missing piece. Maybe they were scared to talk before, or maybe they just, I don't know, haven't had the courage to come forward yet.
It makes you wonder, right? What if just one tiny detail could make all the difference?
It could, yeah. And it makes me think about how we were talking about community before, like how everyone rallied around Katie.
Yeah, everyone wanted to help.
Right. And it just shows you how powerful that can be, that sense of coming together even when something awful happens.
It's human nature, isn't it? To want to support each other in times of need.
Yeah. And even though the episode doesn't have a happy ending, it does make you think about some important stuff. Like appreciating the time we have with people we care about. Life can change in an instant.
That's for sure. You never know what tomorrow will bring.
Right. And it makes you think about safety too,
Yeah, being aware of your surroundings.
And if you see something that seems off, say something. You never know, you might be saving someone's life.
Exactly. We all have a responsibility to look out for each other. And if anyone out there has any information about Petey's case, no matter how small it seems, call the police.
Right. Even a little detail could be the key to solving this whole thing.
Exactly. It's never too late to come forward.
Katie's story is a reminder that even in the darkest of times, there's always hope. Hope that the truth will come out. Hope for justice. And hope that someday her family and friends can finally find some peace.